I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for April the 18th, 2025. Before we get started, I have a few announcements I would like to make. Be sure, if you have not already, go to the Messianic Apologetics website, and here in the right-hand column, you'll see blog notifications. Be automatically notified by email when Messianic Apologetics is updated. Put your email in there, hit subscribe, and it will ask you to confirm. Many of you know we are reintroducing things to our website. If you want to be notified regarding anything new or something which has been reposted, this is the way to do it. This is different than our email announcement list, our email update list. You can subscribe to that via clicking on the envelope icon right there. Okay, our theology roundup for today is going to be discussing the faithfulness of Yeshua the Messiah. And this is something which we have discussed, I have discussed in our ministry publication, The New Testament Validates Torah. And in many ways, this book is sort of the flagship book of our ministry. You can access it here at outreachisraelbookstore.com. New Testament Validates Torah was updated last year, 2024. This is the standard edition. It's not the maximum edition, but it was updated in 2024 with not only a reflection of the way things are pretty much now in the mid-2020s, but also with some very important appendices regarding the status of Torah, the way people in the Messianic community should approach a Torah foundation, weighing in new developments, especially things like pronomian Christianity, as well as the whole matter of Torahism. So this is a resource you'll definitely want to add to your library if you have not already. And there is a chapter called The Faithfulness of Yeshua the Messiah, which we're going to be focusing our attention on today. And one of the things I would like to add to this, because we have been going through some website remodeling, and some of you have been unable or perhaps not easily able to find some of our ministry books and publications. On MessianicApologetics.net, you can see here there's a tab called Publications. Simply click there. Yes, it will take you to the Outreach Israel bookstore, but each one of our books is listed here. Messianic Helper Series, books by Mark Huey, books by J.K. McKee, that guy. Scripture commentaries, everything is listed right there. You can easily find what you are looking for. All right, so let's get started on our theology roundup. The faithfulness of Yeshua, the faithfulness of Yeshua the Messiah. What does that mean? Well, any of you all who have followed me for any period of time are aware that in certain Pauline passages, which are customarily translated as faith in Yeshua or faith in Messiah, I believe that they should instead be translated as the faithfulness of Yeshua or the faithfulness of Messiah. And this can get very technical, but it's something which is very important for us theologically. There is an article on MessianicApologetics.net Let's go back to the website here. Here, there's the articles tab. These articles are all listed in alphabetical order. So go down to the letter F. And you will see here, I've highlighted it, the faithfulness of Yeshua the Messiah. Click there and the PDF file will open up. And yes, this is the chapter from the New Testament Validates Torah. So this goes into a lot more detail explaining, is it faith in Yeshua or the faithfulness of Yeshua? And what does that specifically mean to us as men and women of faith? You know, today, our Christian brothers and sisters all over the world are remembering Good Friday. And for those who are sincere believers, genuine believers, what are they remembering? They're remembering Yeshua's death on the cross, his sacrifice on the tree. And it's something very meaningful for them. He suffered for me. He was humiliated for me. He died for me. And yes, while many of us in today's Messianic community just remembered Passover, and hopefully as we remembered Passover, we were focusing on themes not only of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection, we personalized it somewhat. We focused on what he did for us, what he endured for us. And of course, there are many things to be considered in the Gospels and the book of Acts and the apostolic letters. But there is an important scene which occurred in Galatians chapter 2, the confrontation in Antioch. And yes, some of you watching saw I had to switch screens to Bible software, which we'll get into in just a moment. The conflict in Antioch, where Paul and Barnabas, this was a mixed Messianic assembly of Jewish and non-Jewish believers. Peter came to visit them, and you can go look at the full scene in Galatians chapter 2, but Peter was seen to separate himself during fellowship meal times from the non-Jewish believers. And Paul would have nothing to do with this. He confronted Peter publicly. He accused him of requiring the non-Jewish believers to Judaize in order to be restored to proper fellowship, meaning that they would have to go through the process of being formal proselytes to Judaism in order for some kind of true unity to be restored to the assembly of Messiah followers. And in Galatians 2:16, he nails on something which I think is very important, and it's something which affects us even today as Messianic people. So to just read, and this is from the New American Standard, Galatians 2:6. I'm sorry, the Lexham English Bible, Galatians 2:16. But knowing that a person is not justified by works of the law, if not by faith in Jesus Christ. And we have believed in Christ Jesus, so that we may be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law, because by the works of the law, no human being will be justified. Now, one of the biggest controversies here, we all agree, as those who have placed our trust in the good news, the gospel message, that salvation is not by human actions, it is by placing our faith, our trust in the work of Yeshua the Messiah. Absolutely. But yet, any of us who have gotten into some Second Temple, first century Jewish backgrounds of the New Testament should be aware how there are specific places in the Pauline letters involving the terminology ergon namu, or works of law, where just general obedience to the Mosaic law, the Mosaic Torah, is not what is being discussed. Instead, the terminology ergo namu has a background in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Maaseh HaTorah, a document known as 4QMMT, which pertain to the club rules of the Qumran community. And if you observe their particular club rules, i.e. their halakha, you were to be reckoned as a member of the Qumran community. And so, while it's debated, but many are in agreement that when Paul used the terminology ergon namu, or works of law, he was not speaking of Torah obedience generally. He certainly wasn't speaking of obedience to the moral and ethical principles of the Torah. Instead, he was referring to ancient halakha. How would an ancient sect of Judaism require you to be justified, i.e., reckoned as a member of God's people? Well, in the case of Paul's letter to the Galatians, the main halakha focused on circumcision, meaning ritual proselyte circumcision. And we're all in agreement that no, you do not be reckoned as a member of God's people because of circumcision or ritual proselyte circumcision. You're reckoned as a member of God's people, as God's own, because of the faith you place in God, and by extension, the faith you place in God's Messiah. All right, amen. But just as there is discussion in biblical studies regarding what ergon namu means, here in the Greek of Galatians 2:16, it appears other places. You see hina dikaiothomon ek pisteos Christu kai uk ex ergon namu. So this is customarily rendered, this is the Lexham English Bible, so that we may be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law. Now, works of the law, ergo namu, that's likely referring to ancient Jewish halakha, the halakha of the Judaizers or the influencers confronted in Paul's letter to the Galatians, who would have required ritual proselyte circumcision in order for non-Jews to truly be members of God's people. Paul said, no, you become a member of God's people on the basis of placing faith in him, as it was originally with Abraham, and by extension, the Messiah he has sent. But even more specifically, and there are definitely places throughout Galatians where the faith an individual places in Yeshua, in the Messiah, is in view. But here, because of the Greek construction, ek pisteos Christu, and here you can see the footnote, it can also be rendered as, or by the faithfulness of Christ, the faithfulness of Messiah. So what would it mean to say instead, because by works of the, so that we may be justified by the faithfulness of Christ, the faithfulness of Messiah, and not by the works of the law? How would that change one's orientation to the conflict in Antioch? One would be focusing on what? Human activity, human halakha, human artificial barriers to keep people out of God's intention. So, in order for unity to be restored, the non-Jewish believers would have to Judaize, they would have to become circumcised as proselytes. Human halakha, human works of law. Alternatively, the true way people are to be reckoned as members of God's own is by the faithfulness of Messiah. That takes the Greek clause ek pisteos Christu as a subjective genitive. And what is the faithfulness of Messiah? It's very simple when you think about it. It is Yeshua's obedience to the Father unto death to atone for sinful humanity. Human action, human halakha versus divine action. Yeshua's obedience to the Father unto death to atone for sinful humanity. And what are many people today focusing their attention on? They're focusing their attention on precisely that. They are focusing their attention on Yeshua's obedience to the Father unto death to atone for their sins. Now, I'm sure some of you in your different Passover activities focused on what Yeshua has endured for us, his obedience to the Father unto death, his unjustful arrest, his torture, his humiliation, him having to carry the wooden scaffold to Golgotha, him being nailed by the Roman soldiers, his being ridiculed by various Jews present, various religious leaders present, various Romans present, even one of the criminals being executed right next to him. And I know that for a lot of us, this is something very serious. What are we, as today's Messianic people, to focus our attention upon as it involves our identity? Because there's a lot of debating right now over the identity of God's people, Jewish believers, non-Jewish believers, Jewishness, Gentileness. How much of it misses the point of focusing on human halakha, human barriers, human works of law versus the faithfulness of Yeshua, the faithfulness of Messiah, what he did for us. And an ongoing matter for today's Messianic community is in our remembrance of the Passover and the themes of the Exodus and the themes of the Passover lamb. How do we better capture the themes of what Yeshua has done for us? His Last Supper, his sacrifice on the tree, his resurrection of the dead, and those very solemn themes which can actually get overlooked this time of year by the Messianic community, because what do we get embroiled in? We get embroiled in a lot of very pedantic debates. Well, I'm not so sure it was the Last Supper. Well, you think that 3 days and 3 nights doesn't have to be a full 72 hours when it does. Or you think it has to be a full 72 hours when it doesn't. And it goes on and on and on. Or, you observe the Pharisaic counting of the Omer and not the Sadduceical counting of the Omer. And all of those little debates are what? Works of law. They are human halakha, human opinions. And we get dragged into these debates this time of year as Messianic people by those who have not placed at the center of their being the faithfulness of Yeshua, his obedience to the Father unto death for you and me. And there's no easy answer to this right now, but I think that, and having been in the Messianic community now for 30 years, we're going to have some changes up in store in the future. So I do recommend that you let me get the screen back up for you, that you be sure to look through the article, The Faithfulness of Yeshua the Messiah. And also, if you need to read what are works of the law, that's also available in the article section. You might want to read that first and then read this one. Please do so as well. But arguing for the subjective genitive of the clause, ek pistos Christou, that's not just a bunch of theological gobbledygook. That is something which is very important for us in our growth as mature believers. All right, so let's move on to our news roundup. There's certainly a lot which is going on right now. There are a lot of tensions happening both in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, trade war, the Trump tariffs. Many of the things we go through are things which I passively encounter on social media, mainly on X or Instagram. Although from time to time, some of you all will direct message me an article or something which we can go through. All right, here's something I found on the 10th of April on Instagram, which I thought was rather interesting. What generation do you belong to? Let me know in the comments. And here you have a number of generations with specific labels going back to 1946. The boomers, post-World War II babies, the rise of consumer culture, 1946 to 1964. Generation X, VHS, MTV, a bridge between analog and digital, 1965 to 1980. Now, millennials, the rise of the internet, 9/11, 2008 crash, 1981 to 1996. Because I was born in December of 1980, I broadly identify as being a millennial. And some people think that there's this generation known as Xennial, those who were basically born from 1976 through 1983, actually during the period of the original Star Wars trilogy. But yes, I was around to see both things analog as well as things digital, the introduction of the personal computer. My mother had the original 1984 Macintosh. I remember Windows 3.1 and the introduction of Windows 95 and how that changed everything. I especially remember the transition in the late 1990s from dial-up internet to high speed. Generation Z or Generation Z, smartphones from a young age, progressive, 1997 to 2009. Generation Alpha, digital natives from birth, hyperconnectivity, 2010 to 2024. And then this new generation, Generation Beta, immersed in AI, automation, rapid innovation, which is concluded from 2025, so this year, to 2039. And those will be some of the first people to see the 22nd century. If that doesn't shake you up, I don't know what would. So I thought that was interesting. And yeah, we definitely, as a ministry, especially now with Messianic Insider going to 5 times a week, we're going to deal with issues which concern millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and Gen Beta. Okay, moving on to our next story. This is obviously from a Hebrew Roots channel on X. And if there's this meme posted, and the meme states, Passion Week or Holy Week is Catholicism and is not biblical! Exclamation point. There is no Palm Sunday, Good Friday, not even Resurrection Day. None of these days are in the Bible. These days come from Catholicism. Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and First Fruits are the days we celebrate the death and resurrection of Messiah. They all point to him. Now, I can say this because I've been in the Messianic sphere of influence for 30 years. Bull, S-H-I-T. Because so many people on the Hebrew root side who go after sincere, genuine Christians who over this weekend are going to be remembering the resurrection of Yeshua on Sunday. Today, they are remembering his suffering for them, his death for them. People who go after sincere, born-again, evangelical Christians who are doing their best with their knowledge to remember the death and resurrection of Jesus. How much do they talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus, the death and resurrection of Yeshua in their remembrance of Passover and unleavened bread? Almost not at all. they spend more of their time going after people who have placed the faithfulness of Yeshua as best as they can at the center of their being, and then they get up on their smart-ass high horse to go after them when they themselves are generally relying on their presumed knowledge, presumed works righteousness to reckon them as in right standing with God. Look, I've been in the Messianic community for quite some time. Messianic Judaism does its best, I think, to integrate themes of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection into the remembrance of Passover and unleavened bread. There can still be some improvements, but it does its best. But Hebrew roots, not at all. And so many of the controversies and the difficulties we face are because of memes like this. These people going after genuinely sincere born-again Christians who, yes, they need to connect to Passover, they need to connect to unleavened bread, they need to have a fuller picture of the Last Supper and everything. What good does it do to go after these people when at so many of the Hebrew roots Passover commemorations, there's not going to be a remembrance of Yeshua's death on the tree. There's not going to be a remembrance of his resurrection. The energy which needs to be expelled, focusing on those matters, instead is spent attacking faithful Christians. And indeed, they're going to be held wanting by the Lord in the future. And it's no wonder why Hebrew roots is just a cesspool of false teaching, because more attention is focused on attacking genuinely sincere, born-again Christian believers than, hey, how do we demonstrate to them a fuller picture of God's purpose? So I don't appreciate these kinds of memes. They make me very angry, especially when the people who post them are generally seen to not properly integrate the Last Supper, sacrifice of Yeshua, and the resurrection of Yeshua into their remembrance of Passover and unleavened bread. All right, moving on. This is from End Time Headlines, the 15th of April. Expert claims the body of Jesus Christ is in a hidden chamber under the Great Pyramid of Egypt. This kind of nonsense could easily set the stage for mass deception. This isn't the first time someone has claimed that the body of Jesus is here or there. I mean, that's always been a popular theme of various science fiction shows. These are things we should expect to hear more and more about. I think it's fascinating that over the past several weeks, there's big hidden underground things underneath the pyramids of Giza going down 2 kilometers, and then yesterday I reported about how there are some people claiming that this is the location of the original Garden of Eden. Now we hear that the body of Jesus is hidden under the Great Pyramid. And things are just going to get more and more crazy. Also from End Time Headlines, the 16th of April, growing number of Americans are swapping organized religion for quote-unquote personal truth. A growing number of Americans are moving away from traditional religious institutions, opting instead for individualized spiritual paths that prioritize personal truth, according to recent studies. How many people are, as we get closer and closer to Yeshua's return, I'm spiritual. The Bible has got important things to say and, many important truths. And I believe Jesus was a good teacher, a good reformer, maybe even a prophet of sorts, but he's just one way to the universal consciousness. Expect to see more and more of that in the future. Not people throwing out the Bible as though it's just complete myths and fairy tales, but it's just one of many ways. And we are the universe trying to understand itself. So people, even though I do expect to see more people just embrace outright atheism, I expect to see more people embrace, well, I'm a seeker, and I'm trying, and there's truth in all religions, and we're the universal consciousness, whatever it might be. Expect to see more and more of that. Okay, from Charisma, the 16th of April, so 2 days ago, and you should remember how I refer to some of the recent teachings of Jonathan Cahn regarding the Easter Bunny heresy. Well, here, this article, Is Easter Really a Pagan Holiday? What You Need to Know. And to just briefly read this, one viewpoint is that Easter is rooted in the celebration of the fertility of a pagan goddess, Ishtar, who was from Babylonian times. This celebration of ancient fertility rites would ultimately mean that Christians were celebrating something far from the truth of Jesus' resurrection. Others have also connected Easter to the timing of Passover and the forbidding of Christians eating eggs at the time of Lent in the Middle Ages. The word Easter can also be connected to the Germanic form of the word dawn, which would symbolize the dawn of Christ's resurrection on the third day. Now here, it concludes, regardless of the terms used, what matters most is the posture of our hearts and our focus on the victory of the cross and the empty tomb. Our hearts must be fixed at all times on Christ in sincere worship, not only at this time of year, but in all situations and circumstances. There are many people out there who wonder, where does the term Easter come from? It is Germanic. Eostra, I believe, is the pronunciation, meaning spring, basically. In other languages, it's generally called Pasqua or some derivation of Passover. Yes, there are a lot of question marks involving bunnies and Easter eggs, which do not come out of the story of the Last Supper or the death, burial, and resurrection. But there are a lot of people this weekend who are going to be focusing on some very important themes. And hopefully, as the Lord moves on hearts, they will be supernaturally guided to have a much fuller picture of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection associated with the theological themes of Passover and the Exodus. All right, so moving on. This is a difficult one. This is from the 16th of April, a post by Charlie Kirk on X, commenting on a video, a discussion by David Friedman, the former U.S. ambassador to Israel. And David Friedman, while rightfully discussing some of the problems with anti-Semitism in the West, in the United States right now, says that even though different groups, different social groups, Jewish, Christian, whomever, can oppose anti-Semitism, governments can do a lot more in opposing anti-Semitism a lot faster. And so Charlie Kirk was concerned about this. He says, no non-Jewish person my age has a longer or clearer record of support for Israel, sympathy with the Jewish people, or opposition to anti-Semitism than I do. I regularly refer to anti-Semitism as a lie from the pit of hell because it is. But I have to disagree with Ambassador Friedman here. The First Amendment and our strict freedom of speech is one of America's greatest rights and sets us apart from every other country in the world. One of the central promises of Trump's 2024 campaign was to restore and protect American freedom of speech. And so the issue is opposition to anti-Semitism going to impede upon the First Amendment right to have free speech? Whether we like it or not, the First Amendment protects the freedom of speech of anti-Semites. A line is crossed, of course, when such people begin advocating violence against the Jewish community, violence against an Israeli embassy or consulate, violence against a local synagogue. That's when a line is crossed. But whether we like it or not, anti-Semites can have their opinion. Yet, that same freedom of speech does what? It protects those who speak out against anti-Semitism, who call anti-Semitism a lie from hell, who call neo-Nazis, Hitler sympathizers, the trash, the human scum that they are, and mainly those who are speaking out against anti-Semitism, they have to make the case ideologically. So, how much does something like this from Ambassador Friedman, governments need to formally oppose anti-Semitism and do more? How's that going to play into some of the anti-Semitic narratives? And in this case, we're dealing with the United States of America here. We're not dealing with a country like Germany or Austria, where it is illegal, and rightfully so, to deny the Holocaust, because the Third Reich, Germany, Austria, was involved directly in the Holocaust. So this is just something we have to monitor, and for our purposes here with Messianic Insider, we're just going to continually keep the conversation going. All right. Now, this is something very concerning. This is a post from X on the 16th of April by Nio Berg. Why does it seem like Texas, a supposedly conservative red state, is allowing endless mega mosques and Islamic projects all across its territory? I keep seeing these projects popping up everywhere. Why Texas specifically? And so here is a video for a giant Islamic center in Austin. Now, it should be fairly recognized that the state of Texas, whether it's Houston, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, it's not the only place in America that's having to deal with this. And indeed, we do have freedom of religion here in the United States, but when one's religion becomes something radical and it advocates violence against other people, then we have a bigger problem. And indeed, we just have to continue to monitor this. So if you are someone who doesn't live in a state like Texas, you might live somewhere else, there's likely another mega mosque Islamic center popping up in your area. And yes, ultimately, the only answer is Yeshua the Messiah and salvation. So how many of us are going to have to get into Muslim or Islamic apologetics? How do we interact with Islamic people intelligibly? Okay, thought this was interesting. This was posted April the 16th. In-N-Out Burger. Happy Resurrection Day. We're closed this Sunday so our associates can celebrate with their families. Now, we're still in the middle of the Festival of Unleavened Bread right now. And so I can't eat an In-N-Out burger. We do have them here in North Texas until that's over. Now, they do say in the text here, In-N-Out will be closed on Easter. But there are a lot of evangelical people who they're not quite sure where the term Easter came from. They will refer to what they're remembering on Sunday as Resurrection Day. And they have largely eliminated the Easter bunny, Easter eggs, Easter baskets, some of that childish stuff from their remembrance. And that's important to keep in mind because to them, it's all about the resurrection of Yeshua, the most important event in our faith. All right, some of you all may have already seen this already. It was posted 2 days ago by Right Response Ministries. This is Joel Webon. This guy is a real piece of work. He is openly replacement theology, openly anti-Israel, anti-Zionist. And here in this discussion, one of his colleagues mentioned how there are many Christians out there remembering Passover. He called them Seders, Passover Seders. And they have just been completely dismissive. This is not something Christians are supposed to do. This is an insult to the work of Christ. John Calvin would never have done this. And for a lot of us today who are non-Jewish in the Messianic community, we're more likely to have to deal with, there are various, Messianic Jews out there, particularly on the bilateral ecclesiology side, who they don't like it when evangelical believers actively participate in a Passover Seder, remembering the Exodus from Egypt and the Last Supper. They think their Jewish identity is being infringed upon. You have a lot of that. But this is something which we need to take even more. This is something which affects us a lot more, because evangelical believers partaking of a Passover Seder, they're doing so, yes, to connect to their Jewish roots, but they are people who support Israel. They are friends of the Jewish people. They stand against anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. This thing right here by Right Response Ministries, this is something, when my late father introduced the Passover Seder, he gave a teaching on the Passover Seder. It is, as a Sunday school teacher, the richness of the Jewish roots of the faith and the feasts and Jesus and the feasts. He was opposed by many people who had attitudes precisely like this one. This is what has been witnessed throughout a great deal more of Christian history. Jewish believers in Jesus are Christians. They're not Messianic Jews, and they are to give up their Jewish heritage. And to participate in things like Passover is an affront to Christ and his completed work. Now, Joel Webon is himself a piece of work, and there are a lot of people out there who are not fans of his. They don't like a lot of the things he does. They don't like a lot of his Christian nationalism or hyper-patriarchy or misogyny. We'll continue to monitor some of the things he does and whether he really steps in it and slides. Okay, 3 more stories. This is one which was forwarded to me last night, so I thought it was interesting. This is from the Gateway Pundit. White House science chief says U.S. can, quote, manipulate time and space, unquote. Trump hits at secret weapons, quote, no one knows about. Look, I have no idea if the United States government or different agencies truly do have the ability to time travel, as though they have, a DeLorean or flux capacitor. But I have no question that the issue of time travel, matter manipulation, is something which has been studied and at least experimented with on some level. But yeah, there are a lot of people. Hey, look, we're in the year 2025, ladies and gentlemen. There's some people who do believe that time travel is possible, matter manipulation is possible. I definitely believe the U.S. government, other governments have weapon systems they are not telling us about. But yeah, we just have to continue to monitor this, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Our good friend Candace Owens, God help her. Candace Owens has completely lost the plot, calls out Matt Walsh for thinking space is real. She says that space is completely fake and that humans have never been to space and that NASA was invented to promote the Antichrist belief in science over faith. Candace Owens, you must come to terms with the fact that NASA and space missions have always been this fake and gay, and you need to learn the history of NASA and the Apollo program, which were occultic and satanic. All right, now the Apollo program, named after a pagan Greek god. All right. Are there a lot of questions as to, just with the basic narrative, why did the United States visit the moon in the 1969, the early 1970s, and why have we not been back to the moon? Okay, I've got that question, as I'm sure many of you have as well. And I've got questions about what is NASA doing? What is NASA not doing? I am not prepared to conclude that NASA is all occultic and satanic. I'm more inclined to think that NASA knows things about the greater universe we are not fully ready to sort through. But yeah, Candace Owens, she is a real piece of work, and she's not only perhaps our new favorite anti-Semite and anti-Zionist, but she's promoting one side of these controversies, which I think is inaccurate, whereas the other side is probably more accurate. This idea that we've never been to space, that's just total BS. Of course, we've been to space, but have different space missions, encountered things or discovered things the general population is not ready to consider. We continue to watch and monitor. And so our last story, with that in mind, this posted yesterday. This is from Tulsi Gabbard. Nearly 60 years after the tragic assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, the American people will, for the first time, have the opportunity to review the federal government's investigation, thanks to POTUS's leadership and commitment to maximum transparency. So, one of the things which was anticipated about the second term of Donald Trump, the declassification of JFK, now RFK, we're waiting on MLK, we're waiting on different other things. And of course, people are going to review these documents. Many suspicions people have had about the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy are going to be confirmed. Other things are going to be introduced into the conversation they're not quite ready for. But we are here with Messianic Insider. Yes, it is a part of apologetics to discuss theology. It's also a part of apologetics to engage with what people are saying out there in the world of ideas. And we know anybody who's been part of the Messianic community for any period of time, and especially if you've been in an oneg, a fellowship meal, people talk about these things. And so why should we not talk about these things if we are in any kind of ministry service? Just putting them off to the side and acting like they don't exist, I think, is irresponsible. And that kind of makes our ministry different than a lot of others out there. All right, so that finishes our news roundup for today. I sincerely hope and pray that you all are being blessed during this time of year, Passover and unleavened bread, remembering the Passover and Exodus of ancient Israel, and also properly integrating a remembrance of the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua. We have a lot of sincere evangelical brothers and sisters this weekend who are remembering Good Friday and Easter Sunday. They're not even calling Sunday Easter Sunday. They're calling it Resurrection Day. They're not focused on the Easter bunny or Easter eggs or Easter baskets. They're focused on the work of Jesus. I pray that many of them have a genuine supernatural encounter with the Lord, and the Lord actually nudges a number of them, hey, what would it mean for you to take Passover more seriously, especially in a time when Israel and the Jewish people are under threat, both physically as well as ideologically? All right, so we did cover a lot today. This is our first full week as we've resumed Messianic Insider, going 5 times a week. So we will, of course, pick up on Monday with another episode. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. And we especially thank those of you who have been led to give us a special Passover offering. We'll see you again Monday with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.